Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and I am back with a brand new book to read. This time, we're reading The Shadow Tech Goddess, the third turn, Stenibelle. So in the previous reading, The Shadow Tech Goddess, there are a number of satellite books that go along with the Shadow Tech Goddess that deal with basically the same events, the same characters, but in different universes. The Shadow Tech Goddess dealt with 7 different universes, and you get indications that things were happening in some of these other universes that contributed to the resolution of that particular story, and you get glimpses of these characters as well. Well, in these little satellite books, you actually see what happened in these other universes. And so the third turn, and the turn refers to the knob on top of the antimeter. So this is the third click of the knob. And it's Stenibelle, published in 2015. My God, has it been 6 years already? Whew, time flies. This is by far my shortest book. This book is somewhere around 54, 55, maybe 56,000 words. And usually my books are much higher, like usually in the 120, 130,000 word range. So you get 50 to 60,000 words. That's about 160, 170 printed pages, just depending on your kerning, your font size, all kinds of things. But this book, if you compare it to my other books, it's noticeably smaller. And I've always said, I write until the story is done. Go figure. You write until you're done, no matter how long or short that might happen to be. So in this case, that happened to be around 56,000 words. This is a fun story. I enjoy it very much. Well, I enjoy all my books that I've written. I mean, I wouldn't publish something that I thought was crap, but this one I enjoyed, and the artist, Carol Phillips, really liked the cover that she came up with for this book. And as you can see, Stenibelle on the cover is a girl. When dealing with the character known as the Hagthorpe, as was established in the Shadow Tech Goddess, the Hagthorpe is a extraplanar entity, in this case, that exists in every universe out there. And since the universes are infinite, the Hagthorpe is infinite as well. That's unusual. Usually people have what the Hospitallers call their sphere of influence, or their sphere of mirrors, or which universes I might show up in. And there's an equation called the equation of opposites, and it creates a monstrously huge number, but when you're dealing with an infinite value, it's a pretty small number in comparison. So the number of universes I might show up in, while being a large number, is relatively small in the greater scheme of things. Hagthorpe appears in all of them, which is unique. And the Hagthorpe can be male, female, can be alien, can be non-corporeal, can be like a force, a vergence in time and space. It can be a lot of different things. And the Hagthorpe also has what's known as impassibility in time. That's a concept I explore a lot, which means basically you've existed from the beginning of time to the end, not necessarily in your current form, but in one form or another. You've always been around. And such is the case with the Hagthorpe. And in this case, the one that we've been dealing with most often is Paymaster Stenstrom, our good friend from the Tyrol region of Cana. We've seen him a lot. We saw him in the Shadow Tech Goddess. We saw him in the Cat book, which is the 6th turn of the Shadow Tech Goddess. And there he was, hanging out with Cat. It was cool. It was fun. He was introduced in book 6, The Sands of the Solar Empire, and then again in Against the Juries, and then into the Shadow Tech Goddess series. Paymaster Stenstrom. He's been in a lot of books. In this book, we get a different version of Paymaster Stenstrom. Instead of Stenstrom, we get Stenibelle. And Stenibelle is a girl. You'll notice in these first readings, in the first chapter, I was being careful with my pronouns. I was trying to obscure the fact for the reoccurring readers that Paymaster Stenstrom was in fact a girl. But in thinking about it now, like it was unnecessary. I mean, you look at the name of the book, you look at the girl in the front, and even the text in the back. It says, she's a lady of the House of Belmont. So, I went to a lot of song and dance for really no reason. So, if I could do it all over again, which I might, I would take that out. It's pointless. Stenibelle is a action hero, kind of a reluctant one. If you're aware of how things work in the League is kind of an interesting place. It's ruled by the Sisterhood of Light, but they give the appearance that it's actually ruled in a more patriarchal society when it's really not. It's really the sisters calling all the shots. And one of the ways it manifests itself is through house continuation, inheritances, and so forth. So if you're a house, like the House of Blanchford, or the House of Olin, some that have popped up, House of Durst, you have to have a male somewhere in the succession, otherwise you lose all your stuff and your house basically goes dead, it goes inert. And all your stuff is then up for anybody who can make a claim to it. So the 5th House of Durst, which we met in the original League of Elder books, had 7 daughters. They didn't have any sons, and so their house basically went extinct, and Castle Durst was declared a ruin, and all the people came to try to pick the Durst bones. Anybody with a legal claim tried to come and take stuff from Castle Durst, but Captain Davidge, being a friend of the Dursts, cleared out the castle and put everything in secure storage so that one day, if the house can be reconstituted, he would return their belongings to them. He's a good guy, Captain Davidge. But you see, Durst had no sons. They lost all their stuff. And it's the same thing here with the House of Belmont, South Tyrol. A bit of backstory that doesn't show up in the story, but the house matriarch, Lady Jubilee of Tyrol, greatly loved her husband, Stenstrom the Older, the captain of the warbird Caroline. She loved him a lot, but she started to learn that his job soaring the stars in the fleet was quite dangerous. So she said, I would appreciate it if you quit your job, found something more earthbound here on Cana. Keep your boots on the ground here with me. And he enjoyed his rank, his status, his adventures aboard the high-flying Caroline, so he basically rebuffed her, and he kept on flying the stars in his ship. And she's like, okay, fine. You need a male for this brand new House of Belmont, South Tyrol to continue, and I'm not going to give you one until you give in to my demands. So she's basically saying you're going to have just daughters until you find another more sedate occupation. And the years went by, and eventually they had 29 daughters. And then eventually the pressures of secession began to wear on Stenstrom the Older, and he caught wind of this potion on Baz, which is a very man place. Baz is a very male-oriented planet, unlike other planets like Carina 7, which are more female-oriented. Go around the League, you get a nice sprinkling of that, whether they be male or female dominated. It just depends on where you go, but Baz is very male. And he'd heard that there was this potion called the God Sperm Potion. I wonder who came up with that stupid name. What an idiot. But the God Sperm Potion, you take it and you would have a very high quality son. So he bought it and drank it and then went home and took his wife, Lady Jubilee, to bed. But she'd been taking herbal remedies to keep from having a man, so that it was pretty impossible for her to have a man. They would all be girls. She had 29 so far. All the statistics prove that she's doing something. Otherwise, there would have been a boy at some point in those 29 birthings. So you got the god sperm potion that was quaffed by Stenstrom the Older. You got the herbal remedies Lady Jubilee was taking. A battle in her womb took place, and the god sperm potion carried the day. Huzzah! And out came Stenstrom the Younger, the 30th child of the House of Belmont. And yay, he's a guy, so their succession is assured. In this third turn, in this different universe, that did not happen. The 30th child was Stenibelle, yet another girl. And their house is in trouble. They've had 30 children, all girls. It's looking like this house is going to fall. And the wolves start coming out of the woodwork, looking to pick apart this house and take all the succulent pieces for themselves. And so Stenibelle, this 30th daughter, determined to be the boy that this house did not have, and was going to go out and make a name for herself and try to save the house if she could. But things don't quite work out well. We will see as the story progresses. And one note, I wrote this character back in 2015, and I wrote her exactly like I would a male character, like her male counterpart, Lord Stenstrom. I pulled no punches. I gave it to her both barrels. And as a result, Stenibelle suffers throughout this book. She suffers from self-doubt. She suffers from indecision. She's hiding from her various problems. She needs lots of help from her various friends and allies. She grows slowly. She doesn't start out as much of an adventurer. I mean, that's not what she was indoctrinated as a child. She was meant to be a lady of the house, a socialite, to be more sedate. But in her efforts to save her household, she went out and tried to make a name for herself via adventure. And it didn't work out all that well. Not everybody is just good at something when you first strike out. No, it doesn't work like that. It's not realistic. A reader is willing to absorb a lot, especially in a sci-fi fantasy where things are whacked out. The reader is willing to really put aside their disbelief and ride the train with you. If you give them a fairly competently written story, they're there with you. But if you give them a character that violates basic human nature, they're much less prone to ride the train. They're going to get off as quickly as possible. They might even turn on you. They might start rooting for the bad guy or expecting things that the author wasn't. And the best way to do that, the quickest way to get a reader to turn on you, is just to give them a very unrealistic character as far as human motivation, human endeavor, human frailty and weakness. And so in writing not just this character but all of them, I'm always careful to not create a perfect character. Probably the most that fits that description is probably Captain Davidge, my very first one. He was probably the most flawless, and it's not necessarily a good thing. You want your characters to be well-rounded, and so I well-rounded Stenibelle. And a lot of people, especially on Twitter, hate that. This is a terrible character. We want an invincible war machine. We want a real, just cold, emotionally unavailable, man-killing, lesbian war machine. And that's not what you're gonna get in this book. Stenibelle is is not invincible, far from it. She's not cold and unavailable. She feels a lot. She's got all kinds of problems. She doesn't hate men, and that's a problem. That's a problem, but that's not a problem. That makes her I wouldn't say a realistic character, but a more human one. You get characters these days written by committee, and they're not a real character. You get Rey in Star Wars. You get Captain frickin' Marvel. I could go on and on and on. And you look at these characters and they're caricatures. They're not realistic in the way the audience is expecting them to be. It doesn't matter if they can fly in space without a spacesuit, and shoot photon beams and fly at the speed of light. All that is just window dressing. Is this a real person? Does this person have any depth? Does this person have human problems, and do they deal with them in a human fashion? Are they capable of growth, of becoming more than what they were? Or are they already perfect and there's no room to grow? That's a bad character. It doesn't matter what story you're trying to tell. You've got to get the basic humanity right. And then everything else is just for fun. Is just for funsies, as they say on the Gong Show. We begin Stenibelle, and we will see what you think if I've been chattering about in the last few minutes is just a delusion, or if I'm actually correct in what I'm saying. We're going to read the prologue, which is 1 page long, and then chapter 1, which is Release from Hagthorpe. And then the story will be rolling. So let's proceed, shall we? The prologue of the third turn of the Shadow Tech Goddess, Stenibelle. Belle leaned back against the padded seat of the open-air coach. The great chestnut horse pulled the coach down the lane, and its hooves made a steady clack, clack, clack on the country pebblestones. The countryside moving past the coach was rolling in green, marred only by the narrow road and the occasional ruin decorated in fallen mossy stone. A distance away, a broad azure river flowed in its well-traveled banks. The Xenon lands in the south of Cana was a place far removed from the constant technological movements of the League. A small package wrapped in metallic gold paper, topped with a lacy pink bow, sat on the seat next to Belle. Belle had searched all over for the item within the package. It was expensive and difficult to locate, but well worth the effort and the price. The arrival of this sunny day was worth it for many reasons. The peaceful, landlocked countryside passing by was so different from Belle's home in the sea by Tyrol. A noisy place, pounded by the ocean, occasionally angry with waves and frequent overhead League traffic. Here, other than the hoof falls of the horse and the coy whisper of wind, there was sweet silence. A great manor draped in greenery appeared far down the lane. Belle's heart fluttered with anticipation. It had taken Belle a long time to get to this place, both physically and spiritually. But now that the end of the journey was at hand, Belle thrilled with the prospects of what was to come. Belle picked up the package and held onto it as the carriage entered the manor grounds. And that's the end of the prologue. And as you see, I didn't really specify Belle's gender. I basically stuck to Belle's name, and I was trying to do that just to keep her status as a girl rather than a guy secret, which is kind of silly now that I look back on it, but that's just how I wrote it. That's the prologue. As usual with me, there's really nothing in the story that's irrelevant or a passing exercise in writing. That happened there with Belle in the carriage going down the lane towards this distant manor with a package at her side is significant, and we'll come back later in the story. So now, let's proceed immediately. Chapter 1, Release from Hagthorpe. The door to the prison cell opened, and stale light streamed in. "Prisoner Belmont, you've got a visitor," the guard said as he unlocked the door and stepped in. He carried a Herkimer heat rifle, but had it hanging in a casual manner at his side. It wasn't even powered on. The weapon did not make the usual telltale buzzing sound when activated. The prisoners in this particular ward weren't considered dangerous or an escape risk, and a weapon was, generally speaking, a formality. Belmont had been asleep in the small, uncomfortable bed pushed up against the bare-naked wall. It was just past 6 bells, quite an early time of the morning, and there was usually no rising until 10 bells, when the prisoner was expected to perform duties in the ward cafeteria. "Please wake up," the guard said in a kind voice. The prisoner hadn't been expecting anybody. Belmont's father often visited when his fleet ship was near. Being an esteemed fleet captain, he could loudly sidestep the usual prison regulations and visit whenever he wished. The rather large throng of Belmont's sisters also visited on occasion, though they had to navigate the yards of red tape and other demands imposed by the prison. A few of Belmont's sisters publicly stated their strong disapproval of this situation and disavowed Belmont altogether. Virginia and Lyra, the two closest sisters, remained loyal at least. Belmont's heart would have been broken otherwise. Lyra and Virginia were the most loved of all. "Who is it? One of my sisters?" the prisoner asked in a dreamy, sleep-filled voice. "Don't know. Go on. Get dressed." The guard patiently waited as Belmont stretched and got out of bed. He turned away for a moment as the prisoner dressed in the modest prison garb of somber white linens. The cell was dirty white and empty save the small bed, a modest writing table, and a chamber pot. The cell lacked a modern commode. A tiny window looked out on the brown courtyard far below. The prisoner continued dressing as the guard patiently waited, stepping into baggy articles of clothing and buttoning buttons. "I'm done," Belmont said. The floor was freezing. There were no shoes allowed the prisoner, an old prison rule that had never been discarded. "May I have a moment to attend to my hair? I've been sleeping. I'm certain it's a fright." "You look fine," the guard said. "Come along. Your visitor is waiting." The guard escorted Belmont out of the prison complex into the yard. The ground was stony and a little jagged. With no shoes, the prisoner winced a little with each tentative step. The guard noticed. "Do you want some slippers, Belle? I think I can manage to get you some." No, thank you, I'm fine." The prisoner was determined to simply ride it out and endure the pain. Outside, the glossy cyan sky of Brynvald glistened in midday sheen. There were no walls around the Hagthorpe prison complex. No moats, no towers, no stockade. The whole brownstone campus was situated in a tumbled fashion atop one of Brynvald's famous flying rocks. Literally, a large mass of stone that floated high above in Brynvald's magical sky. "The rocks float due to a high concentration of brindisite ore which repels the iron strata of the system's surface below." Belmont had been told that once by the guards, as if a tourist on holiday seeing the sights, and not a prisoner bound there by law. Hagthorpe Prison was situated square in the center of the southern swarm, a massive cluster of floating rocks of varying size that stretched off into the horizon for thousands of miles. Hagthorpe's rock was a little over 2 miles square and teetered from north to south at a regular basis. It wasn't wise to venture too close to the edge past the flashing warning posts, as the feeling of tilt was most pronounced there. A long fall awaited. Beyond the perimeter, a small but ever-present squadron of Brynvald hunter rocks orbited, waiting for any who might actually try and escape via gift or other smuggled technology. They were nothing more than small flying rocks, fitted out with engines and thrust exhaust so they could be piloted, turned, and raised up a bit. Belmont was led to a small courtyard. A man in a simple black suit awaited. His drab attire matched the drab surroundings. He rustled and appeared rather ill as the prisoner and the guard approached. The guard stepped back and turned on his Herkimer. "Prisoner, bow and present yourself." Belmont squared and bowed as commanded. "Good sir, I am—" The man interrupted. "I know who you are." He cleared his throat and pulled a handkerchief from his coat. He dabbed his sweating forehead. "The motion of this eider-down rock is going to be the death of me." Belmont and the guard glanced at each other in a knowing fashion. Only those of the weakest constitutions were made sick by the ever-present wobble of the rock. "Shall I summon a bit of calming medication for you, good sir?" the guard asked. The man considered a moment. No. The prisoner chimed in. "If you have any menthols on you, sir, smoking them occasionally helps calm the system." The man nodded and reached into his coat, pulled out a silver case and opened it, revealing a neat lineup of brownish menthols tucked inside. He selected one with slightly shaking fingers. As the rock gave a slight lurch, he dropped his menthol and the case, the contents spilling out and rolling in random directions. He was clearly flummoxed. "Guard, where is my coach?" "In a standard parking orbit. Visitors' vehicles are not allowed to remain parked on prison grounds." "Please inform my coach to make ready to return for me at once." "I shan't be long." He turned a flaccid shade of green and sucked in his breath as the rock shuddered. He tried to compose himself as he turned to the prisoner. "I am Untitled John, Esquire, here on behalf of my client." "And who might that be?" the prisoner asked with a bit of dismay. "Am I being paneled again?" No. My client is unnamed at this time, and..." The rock began its regular tilt to the south, and Ottoman John reacted badly. He fell down to all fours, was on the verge of becoming sick from the motion. Belmont and the guard both had their Hagthorpe heels and felt virtually nothing. They shared a quiet laugh at his expense. His head lolled between his shoulder blades. Ottoman John spoke in a strangled voice into the stony ground. "God, please fetch my coach and give me a few moments with this person." "That shall violate prison rules, sir," the guard replied. "Sir, prisoner Belmont is an inmate of Ward 4, a low-risk, minimum security wing," Ottoman John croaked. "The prisoner in question has maintained an exemplary record throughout. Additionally, per the secure laws and procedures of the Exalted Prisonatorium of Hagthorpe, 19th edition, Rule 11457, paragraph 2, Section 4 states, and I quote, prisoners displaying no marks of unruly or disciplinary behavior and occupying wards 4 through 8 may be afforded 20 minutes of assured privacy with the duly processed visitor, provided the visitor, which in this case is me, understands all procedures and notices of danger. Yes, thank you, the guard said. I am aware of the standing prison rules on the matter. However, Rule 11457 pertains to a conjugal visit. Are you here to have a conjugal encounter with prisoner Belmont? I'll remind you, sir, this is a prison, not a whorehouse. The guard seemed most protective of the prisoner. No, most certainly not, Ottoman John objected. The rule assumes a conjugal nature to the visit. However, there is no specific wording requiring it. Now then, I have 20 minutes. Get my damn coach. The guard bowed and walked away. I shall bring this up before the next convened Board of Corrections and Notations, and the wording of the rule shall be clarified. We shall not have this issue again. The guard continued on, assuming a watchful position at the far wall, and sent for the sick man's vehicle, as requested. Ottoman John rose weakly to his knees. Belmont laughed and picked up a few of the man's menthols as they rolled about on the ground. "Here, sir, I'm sorry you lost your menthols," the prisoner said, holding them out. He took a sweaty breath and gently took them. "Thank you. My time is short. This rock is not to my liking. So I shall be direct. You are interred here for no less than 10 years by prison counting due to your theft of the main fleet vessel Seeker 7 months ago. Is that correct?" I maintained my innocence. "Yes or no, please." "Yes. I was the duly appointed commander of the Seeker, and the Admiralty of the Fleet sought to steal my paid monies and pull the command chair out from under me with malice and intent. And for that, I was paneled, censured, found guilty, and sentenced." Ottoman John appeared unsympathetic. "Such things happen. This is not a world for the timid, is it? The Fleet Admiralty enjoy a bit of theater now and again, don't they? If you want something, my dear, you must stretch out your hand and take it no matter what it is." Ottoman John, green, sweating, bleary-eyed, looked up at the prisoner. "You are a beaten-down person, are you not, Belmont? You... His voice hitched and he vomited. Belmont stepped back. Unshod, the prisoner wished to avoid his expanding pool of sick, clogged with the unidentifiable remains of his breakfast. When Ottoman John finished, he stood on shaky legs, still holding his menthol sticks in his hand. "Are you overly attached to this place, Prisoner Belmont? Have you a fondness for tilting ground and pointed guns?" He leaned against the wall. "I don't understand your question." Ottoman John was near his end. Overhead, the welcome sight of his vehicle soared past and landed in the reception compound several buildings away. The man was jubilant. "At last. Yes or no, my dear? Do you want out of this place or not?" "Yes, of course, though I'm fond of my guard." "Do you enjoy an opportunity to clear your name?" "Yes, of course." He stumbled away. "Guard!" he called. "Finished with this prisoner." The guard quickly came and took the prisoner back to the ward. 2 weeks later, prisoner Belmont was ushered from the tiny cell in the middle of the night, allowed to clean up a little, and brought into a briefing area lit up in sterile white lights. There, the prisoner was interviewed at length by an assemblage of administrative officials and presented, item by item, with personal possessions that had been confiscated upon internment: a black Vith-style hat, a pair of registered Los Capricos weapons known as INTs, a small box of Stenibelle striker plates, a nickel-plated Grenville .40 pistol, bullets removed and bagged by prison staff, a white silk blouse, a black pair of Tyrol leggings, size small, a pair of Tyrolese boots, also size small, ancillary bits of clothing, socks, undergarments, brassiere, and a green silk sash, a money bag containing 24 Belmont sesterces, a long green coat of Hoban Turlemagne with HRN riveted on the collar. The administrating officials were confused. Most of this clothing appeared to be men's clothing, albeit of small size. They wanted to know if they had the correct items. The prisoner, dressing, assured them they were. The prisoner was given a moment to finish, and then was made to sign a host of documents, both holographic and on paper. That done, Belmont's file was stamped closed. Belmont was ushered out to the main prison skyport. At the end of the softly lit rock path, a skycar awaited. "Is this craft my passage?" Belmont asked. Nobody responded. The skycar's hatches opened and stood waiting. Newly freed citizen Belmont hadn't asked any questions during the whole process, and no one had volunteered anything. Apparently, freedom was at hand. Belmont should be elated, or relieved at least. However, citizen Belmont didn't feel much of anything. Things were happening too quickly. Belmont had thousands of questions, yet none came to mind. The guard, he'll be missed. He was a good fellow. Mind blank, feeling somewhat dizzy, Belmont crunched across the yard in Tyrol boots towards the sty car. Being free meant having to cope with all the things that had happened. Removal from chair, paneling, public humiliation and trial, censuring by the Sisterhood of Light. Belmont had hoped those troubling things wouldn't have to be dealt with for some time, perhaps not until the sting of it all was lessened through the years. Not enough time had passed. The wounds were still fresh. Sitting inside the sky car were a man and a woman. They got out as Belmont approached. The man was tiny, with sloped shoulders and bright blonde hair. The woman was also small. She wore linen robes of green and red, and had a great pinned-up mass of black hair. She looked like a pilgrim of Marion. Belmont was familiar enough with their order, playing in the ruins of their old hermitage on the hill with Lyra and Virginia, laughing and giggling, pretending they could see the Marion star. "You see their star?" Lyra would ask. "I do. I see it," though Belmont could not see the star. "Are you to transport me home? Back to Cana?" Belmont asked. "We are," the man responded. A slouchy civilian and a pilgrim of Marion were the pilots? An odd pair? Belmont walked past them, climbed aboard, and got comfortable in the back. "All set back there?" the man asked. "Yes, thank you." He and the woman climbed back in, and the man lifted the sky car into the air and threw the swarm of floating rocks to the clear sky of Brynvald's lower atmosphere. Belmont watched the prison fall away into the distance and settled back for a long trip into space. "Where am I going?" Belmont asked in a soft voice. "Home? I'm assuming it's home, yes?" The sting of conviction, the humiliation of censure, and the loss of status hit full once again. The raised eyebrows, the disapproving stares. "I did all of this for you, for our house. What actions did you take? What help did I have?" At least safe and hidden in prison, Belmont was out of the League's eye and was a dead topic. Now freed, there will be talk and rumors again that Lyra and Virginia and the other Belmont sisters would have to deal with in full. Belmont did not want that. They had suffered enough. Perhaps prison was a better place to be. It was a good, safe place to hide. As they climbed skyward, the woman turned back. She reached out and gently touched Belmont on the knee. "How are you, Belle?" she asked. Belle? She used Belmont's old nickname. Belmont looked up and stared at the woman, trying to place her face. She was undeniably pretty, a porcelain-like face with cherub cheeks, soft blue eyes, and a comforting smile. "Are you a pilgrim of Marion, ma'am?" "I am, Belle." Again with the nickname. "And do I know you?" The small man flying the rip-car turned back. "You know us both, Belle." Perplexed, Belmont stared hard at the man. He was mousy and slight, wearing a tailored brown Calvert suit. He wore an odd pair of lenses on his face, whereas the woman with black hair sitting next to him was a complete stranger. The small man looked somewhat familiar. Wait, yes, Belmont knew this man. "It's Aram, Belle, your helmsman on the Seeker. Remember me?" The Seeker. Belmont cringed a bit at the name and all that came with it. "Oh, yes, I remember. I didn't recognize you without my ugly old glasses? Yeah, I got rid of those. These ones are much more stylish, wouldn't you say?" The woman sitting next to him smiled. She had such a pretty smile. "We realize this must be very strange for you, Belle. It's strange for us as well. This is a bizarre realm, to be sure. Just trust me when I say there is a place where the three of us are very close friends. You saved my life once." "Did I?" "Yes, with those ints you carry." Stenibelle laughed. "Oh, did I clock somebody over the head with them in a bar or something? I've never seen a pilgrim of Marion in a bar." It wasn't in a bar, Belle. I keep forgetting myself. Introductions are in order. My name is Lady Alesta of Dare, 10th Order. I am Lord Aram's betrothed, and I'm also a pilgrim of Marion, as you just pointed out. In the realm where we come from, you are to stand in a very special place at our wedding. And what realm is that? It's hard to explain. Suffice it to say, there are many of you, and there are many of us as well. This is one realm out of many. Allow me to ask, you've never worn a mask or courted a woman named Lillian of Gamboa, have you? Belmont was puzzled. A mask? Yes. Where we come from, you once wore a mask. Belmont sighed. Oh, that's odd. And am I supposed to believe that? Why would I choose to wear a mask? Was I a criminal there, too? Did I accost travelers on the roadway and steal their wares? And to answer your question, I've never courted a woman. And Aram turned back from the wheel. You wore a mask, Belle, because it contained magics that protected your soul from being ripped apart. And there's one other thing you need to know. What? In the place we come from, you're a man. Stenibelle, Lady of Belmont South Tyrol, could see her reflection in the Skycar's glass. A pretty Belmont face, framed with black Belmont hair. It had been a while since she'd seen her own face, as there were no mirrors in Hagthorpe. She needed a bit of a haircut. Her black hair had a wild, curled edge to it. She could do with a touch of makeup as well. And there were her men's clothes that she wore in public, despite the fact she enjoyed wearing her Belmont gowns when at home. She was going to be the son her father never had, going farther than even her tomboy sister, Lyra. Stenibelle reared back and laughed hard, holding her hand to her full bosom. There are no men in Belmont South Tyrol. I'm the 30th of 30 Belmont daughters. My mother refused my father a son as he would not quit the fleet. Hence, our line is near to an end. Where we come from, Belle, you were born a man. Your name there is Stenstrom, after your father, and you are the duly appointed captain of the MFV Seeker, privateer wing. Sounds like a nice place, Stenibelle said. You're also a lot taller as a man. I figured, even as a lady, you'd be taller. Aram appeared to be curious. Tell me, Belle, your Ents, do they work for you here? Ladies can't fire Ents where we come from. She pulled an Ent from her sash, pointed it at her head, and pulled the trigger with a hollow click. The hammer fell and nothing happened. They do not. These are treasures of our line. They belong to my grandfather. I simply carry them because I like to. I'd hope to give them to my son someday when I have children. Alesta had a question. Why didn't you try to break out of Hagthorpe prison, Belle? How could I? I was interred. With your Tyrol sorcery. My what? Sorry? Come on, Belle, Aram said. You can pick pretty much any lock you encounter. You're never disarmed with your marziple daggers, and you can fade into the shadows and they'd never see you. Of course we know all about it. Stenibelle was thunderstruck for a moment. These people appeared to have full knowledge of her deepest and most closely held secrets. You're aware of these things because you know me, correct? Because we're friends, you know these things. That's right, Belle. She was finally convinced these people weren't mad. All right, then. Why didn't I attempt to escape? I simply wanted to perform my time, blemish-free, and be done with it. My sister, Virginia, advised that course of action at the beginning. Seemed like good advice. 10 years isn't so long in the greater scheme of things. So I stayed in my cell and was a good girl. Perhaps 10 years out, nobody would remember me. I think that's what I wanted most. Questions began to sort themselves out in Stenibelle's head. So, how is it that I'm a free woman after less than a year? Alesta spoke. She had a pleasing voice, tinged with a Barrow accent. From what we've been told, you have been freed by a professor from the University of D. Who? Did you say a professor? Yes. Her name is Grand Dame Hannah Ben Sherlamp, EVOR, Aram said. The fellow you met the other day, Ottoman John Esquire, is her associate and leg man. She went back through the specifics of your case, found a few minor improprieties and slights in procedure, and quickly built the basis of an argument to call your trial null. The sisters were agreeable with the course of action, and hence, here is your release. A free man. Woman, sorry. We are taking you to a transport which will ferry you back to Cana at her expense. The sisters helped us get this opportunity to speak with you. So then, I'll ask, why does a professor from D have such an interest in me? The sky car broke the clouds and Aram leveled out a bit, apparently in no hurry to get to where they were headed. Hannah Ben Sherlamp is a professor well known for her many contributions to the various arts and sciences. She's a grand eminence, and she's also a ruthless pursuer of fame, a thief, a murderess, and traitor to the League, some say. Quite the resume of infamy, Stenibelle remarked. We're being serious, Belle. I see, so my question remains unanswered. What does she want with me? She often employs those whom she believes have some skill and little recourse available to them. She knows of your skill with Tyrol sorcery, and she knows of the state of your house's affairs. She intends to use you in her most current ambitions. The sisters advise caution, as they love you. Now I know you two are off your rig, Stenibelle said, laughing. The sisters despise me, as was made evident during the trial. Well, not true, Alesta said. The sisters care deeply for you. They made a public show of their displeasure, as with their censure. However, they manipulated the proceedings behind the scenes. They also ensured your internment was as comfortable as possible. The fleet's man wanted you branded as a dangerous felon and placed in Ward 1, where the worst of the lot go. The sisters prevented that. Very kind of them. And why did they bother? Well, Belle, where we come from, you are the sisters' it-man. Pardon? It's a man who has the genetic ability to receive the sisters' power. The Stenstrom we know is incredibly strong, virtually invulnerable, can perform TK like the sisters, and can dispel shadow tech. How fascinating. However, as you can see, I'm not a man, nor am I an it-man. I'm not strong, I'm not invulnerable. I can barely last a minute against my sister Lyra in a friendly wrestling match. I could never beat her. Strong? Invulnerable? She remembered getting thrown into the sand by her sister Lyra. Stenibelle, the youngest, the smallest, never able to out-wrestle her sister in the sand. Get up, Belle, she recalled her sister saying. Get up! The sister said that here you do have some abilities, mostly regarding an imperviousness to time and time alteration. I don't know what that specific import has, so don't ask. Stenibelle had no idea what that meant and was tiring of the company. Well, jolly for me, she said. She closed her eyes and hoped to retreat inside herself. Jolly for me. Alesta sounded sad. There's much at work here, Belle, past the surface of things. We are subject to it, as are you, and the sisters too. There is a doom that could be coming, and they need your help to circumvent it. She rolled her eyes and tuned Alesta out. She wanted them to go away. She wanted the peace and forgotten solitude of her cell. She stared out the window. A lot of nonsense, she mumbled. In another place, I told you pretty much the same thing, and there you listened, Alesta said. Stenibelle had enough, and her temper came up. She struggled in her seat, the harness digging into her side and galling her. In another place, I did this. In another place, I did that. What a load of bollocks. Perhaps you should go back to that happy place, wherever it is, and converse with a better version of me, in a place where I'm a man, an it-man. I want nothing to do but return to what's left of my holdings and become a recluse spinster, shaking my fist at the injustice of the world from the privacy of my own crumbling parlor. Alesta was saddened. Belle, I know you've had a hard time of it, but But what? I've been publicly humiliated, incarcerated, censured. My money is all but gone defending myself in the courts, and my house is soon to be extinct. I tried to go out and make my mark with the small hope of saving our house. And look what happened. What a sorry bit of tabloid news I was, yes. Perhaps my departed mother was correct. Tyrols needn't involve themselves outside of Tyrol. Nothing good may come of it. You're only half Tyrol, Belle. The other half is Belmont. Bold and adventurous. Am I? Alesta wanted to say something further, but stayed quiet. They spent the rest of the trip in silence. And with that, we conclude part 1, Release from Hagthorpe. So, as I mentioned, I pull no punches with Stenibelle. She starts out in a pretty bad state. She's in jail, and you really can't get much worse than that. If you know the Belmont saga, the original stories with Paymaster Stenstrom, the underlying plot was that he was supposed to, or that he bought the old Warbird Seeker that was going to be taken out of commission. He basically bought the captain's chair. You can do that in the League if you have enough money. The admirals didn't like him much. They thought he was a clown. They thought he was a goof. So they decided, we're going to steal his money. They do that from time to time. So they gave him a mission to deliver some brandy to Baz, and whenever you're newly appointed to a ship's captain's chair, you have to perform a mission at the pleasure of the Admiralty. Usually it's not much. Usually it's kind of just an errand. But if you don't succeed, if you don't properly do the mission, you lose your chair. Well, his mission was to deliver a crate of brandy to Baz, but the Seeker had been scuttled. Its ships had been removed. The ship was basically in pieces. So there's no way he's gonna be able to get this brandy to Baz because this ship isn't going anywhere. But through the course of the story, he manages to get the Seeker to Baz, and he wins his captaincy. Stenibelle had a very similar experience as far as buying the captain's chair, going out trying to make a name for herself. But in her case, she failed. She didn't get the brandy to Baz. In fact, she was incarcerated by the fleet and paneled, which is, in my legal terms for the League, it means you're on trial for various misadventures, appropriations, and misdeeds. When you get paneled, that means you're being thrown on trial for something. And for a rich blue A-lister, which Stenibelle was, things go bad for you in trial. You basically have to pay for everything. You have to pay for the judge. You pay for the use of the courtroom. You pay for the clothes that the people watching the trial are wearing. You pay for the food that they'll be eating during recesses, and so on and so on. And you also, if you're being incarcerated while you're in trial, you pay for your incarceration too. So being paneled is a ruinously expensive process. Eventually, she uses the term on the bag, and that means when you're actually getting deposed while on trial, you're actually in the witness chair. That means you're on the bag. And so Stenibelle's got all kinds of issues with guilt and not necessarily guilt, but humiliation. She was humiliated during this trial. She failed. She lost all the money that she paid to have the Seeker refitted. Then she had to pay for her trial, for her paneling. It pretty much wiped the Belmont household coffers out. And she was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the Seeker affair, as it's known. And Aram and Alesta were Paymaster Stenstrom's sidekicks and allies. And throughout the Shadowtech Goddess books, they're like Stenstrom's guide. They're privy to information that nobody else has due to their association with the woman with the gun. We'll mention her later. You might remember her from the Shadowtech Goddess books if you read those. But they're here again guiding Stenibelle, and she's pretty salty and feeling sorry for herself and feeling still humiliated by what happened to her while she was being paneled. So they're telling her, we're from another universe. You know us there. And you know us here too, but we are Vulgrums or extraplanar entities because we're in a universe that's not our own at the moment. We're going to go back soon, but right now we're visiting. We're just passing through. We're here to help you out. The things they told her, they knew a lot about her, so I don't really know if she was buying what they were saying. If someone walked up to you and said they knew you in another universe, what would you do? So I have to say, if someone came up to you and said, hey, we're from another universe and we knew you there, you'd probably not take the news very well. You're like, you're a fucking idiot. But this is the League, and the League is a little bit different from the reality that we all enjoy or endure, however the case may be. The League is a far-flung, star-faring civilization that's run by the Sisterhood of Light, and the sisters do all sorts of things that to the general public look like sorcery. They can lift things with their mind, they can read your mind, they can set things on fire. They see these things every day. Also, mental gymnastics is not uncommon. People with the gifts of the mind, people can perform telekinesis with each other. They can do all sorts of strange things. They can turn invisible and command you with their voice. There's a lot of weird things rolling around the League. So it's not necessarily, well, not surprising, not unheard of for someone to come up and just make an outlandish claim. You're not just gonna write them off as a total moron. So that was my whole reasoning behind that scene. It sometimes comes off like, hey, what are they doing? But no. She still doesn't believe him much, but she's not going to just think they're a bunch of lunatics, necessarily. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So they tell her they're from another world, and that in this other world she's a guy, and that he succeeded in his seeker mission, and that makes her feel even worse. Like, well, he made it. Why couldn't I make it? Stuff like that. So that first meeting with Aram and Alesta didn't go well, as I said. Stenibelle's kind of pouty at this point, kind of feeling sorry for herself. She's kind of still embarrassed by the whole thing, and prison is a good place to hide. Not very heroic. Not something a hero would do, at least at this point. But again, Stenibelle is not a static character. She doesn't start out amazing. She's got to work up to it, and that we'll see in the various chapters how she accomplishes that. But here we go. We're off and running. Next chapter. Hannah Ben Sherlamp, our old friend Hannah Ben Sherlamp from the other Shadow Tech Goddess books, is back, and she's here again, and she has a much larger role than she had in the previous books. So, until then, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.